How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
It's a pleasure. I want to point out, speaking of Star Wars fanboying, that when you were on your way in, there was a question that came in about whether you would prefer a red or blue mug because you're a member of, whether you're a member of the rebellion or not quite a member of the rebellion.
It's ambiguous. Let's say, yeah. Paint it half and half. Why not?
The question was whether the red would be okay. There's so much I want to talk to you about. As I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about music. I want to talk a little bit about the night of. I want to talk a little bit about Star Wars. But I'm hoping that you can maybe start with a story. And a story that really stuck out to me in reading about you is going back to your time in high school. At a time, sixth form, which I believe is like grade 11, grade 12 in Canada.
It's about like 16 to 18 years
16 to 18. So you're older. You're getting to the end part of high school. You're feeling like your teachers, your student organization wasn't fairly representing the interests of the entire student body. You decide to do something about it. What exactly did you decide to do?
They have an election. So that's so funny, about that thing. You have an election. The student body vote for the boys they want to be the kind of prefects, the monitors, the head boy.
The upperclassmen, sort of.
Exactly.
Sure.
There we go. And so you do a vote, and then the teachers kind of do another vote on top of that. And the idea is that it's a kind of democratic process. But I think the school over the 7 years that I was there was going through a lot of growing pains. It was transitioning from a kind of generally white upper middle class school to something that was a bit more diverse, both in terms of the cultures and classes that were represented there. And I felt like the upperclassmen or the school establishment didn't really reflect that. So I kind of got the whole year group together in the lunch break, and I said, we all got to do this vote. Let's rig the vote. Let's all just vote for boys that have been suspended and boys that are black or Asian, because we never get to be part of the establishment in this school. And pretty much, it was a secret ballot, so I don't know how many people voted for it, but it was enough people did that it kind of caused a big furore at school. And I was one of the people that the boys all voted for, because I was kind of got into a lot of trouble, and obviously I'm not white. And I think the teachers then get to kind of either validate that round of student voting or blackball it, which means veto it.
So they can say no even if the students vote.
Yeah, so they put like a black balls against people who they say under no circumstances can they be prefects. And I kind of got a record number of black balls, which I take with a kind of bit of pride, I guess. Childish person that I am. But I guess it was just trying to throw up a point about kind of, what do we get a say? But in a way, it kind of triggered a larger conversation at the school, and then they started kind of all these focus groups with different, minority groups at the school to try and be a bit more representative and understanding. So I was glad that, doing a stunt like that kind of created a larger conversation at school.
It's a word that's used, I think, a little bit too much. It's become one of those buzzwords, but it still works here, which is a disruption. And you feel like that disruption that you kind of brought to the school at that moment, and then when you went into Oxford, the disruption that you had by getting involved with ethnic minority representation on the campus theater stage, with trying to make more space for people who weren't necessarily being seen on stage to be seen. It feels like that was a form of disruption that, for lack of a better term, that followed you even through Oxford. What was driving your desire, and what does drive your desire to take all of these actions?
Oxford's actually kind of an interesting example, because when I first arrived there, it was a really big culture shock for me. I'd kind of previously won this scholarship to go to a private school, so there was already some element of kind of, code switching between the kind of environment I grew up in,
which wasn't
home.
It wasn't an upper middle class. It wasn't an Oxford-y kind of.
No, not at all. And the school I'd gone to, but the jump from the school even to Oxford was even greater. So it was quite a culture shock for me, and I felt a kind of like, I don't know. The first person I met there told me I remind them of Ali G. And they meant that as a kind of compliment, like, oh, hey, cool, you're like that, weird character on TV.
Oh, good. Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of thought I should leave. I didn't really want to stick around there. And then that's when I kind of realized that actually that's exactly what I should do. The fact that I don't feel like I belong there means that other people feel like they probably don't belong there, right? Like none of us are that special or unique. So maybe it would be a good opportunity to try and kind of make some space for people like me. So what I did was I started a club night called Hit and Run, and it was a kind of hip hop drum and bass club night. And it kind of, at that time I was kind of rapping a lot on the London pirate radio station scene. So it allowed me to kind of continue honing my skills as an MC, but also just create a space to meet like-minded people. And it was a runaway success, particularly because there was nothing else like it there. And it kind of taught me a lesson that, you know, where the place where you think you stick out is the place where you should stick it out and ride it out. And you can offer something new, and it can sometimes be quite lonely and quite disheartening or frustrating, but ultimately you're bringing something different to the table. And so in a way it was quite a good training for the film industry in a way, where I also felt like maybe I wasn't seeing myself reflected back when I was you know, watching TV or watching films, and those moments when I felt discouraged or frustrated or invisible were the moments where I remembered that experience and thought, okay, so because everyone's kind of implicitly telling you don't belong here, this is exactly where you should be. This is where you can kind of make a change and offer something different.
That form of social advocacy, that form of activism that you were doing at Oxford, that you were doing in your own way at Oxford, in your own way in high school, it would lead some to think that you would pursue a career in say, professional social activism, a career in politics. And what was it that drew you to acting?
Well, you know, it's funny when people say that, but I don't really think of myself as kind of a massively political person.
Right.
I certainly wouldn't kind of like flatter myself with the label of an activist. You know, I'm not out there on front lines with pickets. I'm not kind of doing grassroots work. I mean, I'm just someone who is like, you know, quite mildly socially engaged, you know, and I think, I just kind of think that it's weird in a way that we think that artists are either artists or they're like political artists, if you know what I mean. To me, it kind of like the key role of an artist or a creative person is to engage with the world around them. So in a way, I think I'm just kind of being an artist or a creative person in what I consider to be the true sense of the word, and rather than being a kind of weird subset of creative or artist that is like some hardcore activist. You know, I'm just kind of care about the world around me and interested in exploring it through creativity, you know. But
also communicating that. Your op-ed, which I mentioned in The Guardian, was shared widely, even in Canada, about your experience of being someone who's British, of Pakistani descent, going through airports, of how auditions. You said something really powerful. You said that something like you thought that auditions would prepare you for airports, but it was the other way around, that airports prepared you for auditions. Maybe I have that the wrong way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd encourage people to kind of check out the essay itself.
It really is quite powerful. Don't listen to me summarize it, by the way.
Thank you.
Do not listen to me summarize it. It's a really bad idea.
I guess it's tricky for me to summarize it as well.
No, but I mean, I don't want you to do that. But what is it that drives you? Like you said, you could just be in roles and try to be an observer of the world and try to speak about it in interviews here and there. But this was an example of where you said something. You said something outside of a creative role. You said something outside of an interview about your other role. You wrote a piece that was shared wildly and a lot of people related to.
Well, I mean, it was a great feeling, you know, to see that people kind of related to that. And to be honest, it was a bit of a surprise, because I think all of us in our own way are taught to think that maybe our own individual experience isn't that interesting or relatable, you know. That there's something else, there's another story happening elsewhere that's cooler or more relatable or more mainstream or more, exciting to be told. And that's probably true. I don't think I've got the most relatable, exciting, sexy story to be told by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't think that should mean people shouldn't, you know, talk about their own experiences.
Yeah.
And an interesting lesson I've learned this year is, both with the essay and with my Englistan mixtape and the Sweatshop Boys album, is actually that the more honestly and specifically you kind of mine your own personal experience, the more it resonates with people. Even if they can't relate to its specifics, what they relate to is the kind of authenticity of what you're saying, just the honesty of it. And that's been a kind of big lesson for me in general this year. And the reason I wrote it wasn't because I thought loads of people are going to relate to it and people would share it and it would go viral. The reason I wrote it is kind of the opposite. I wrote it just for myself, just to get it off my chest, under the assumption that no one would care about it. I mean, who can relate to that? Who can relate to like, oh, people asking you for a selfie while they're swabbing you for explosives? That's probably not a very common experience. But just in speaking about your experience, honestly, I think it does connect with people. So that's been really encouraging to me, and I hope it's encouraging to other people who feel that maybe their story is too weird or unrelatable to be spoken about.
If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Riz Ahmed. We were just speaking about his piece in The Guardian that was shared widely in Canada. But what I want to talk about next is a little different. I want to talk about Star Wars. You are part of the new Star Wars film, a part of Rogue One. Were you a Star Wars fan growing up?
I was a fan, but having met real hardcore Star Wars fans, I use that word very, very lightly.
You
with a
realize
massive
that,
pinch of salt.
Yeah, you kind of like it compared to them.
Yeah, I kind of think it's cool. Yeah, compared to them, exactly.
Yeah. There's a gentleman here filming the television show, Steve, who, as soon as he heard the word Star Wars coming from our office yesterday, ran in and said, "I got a couple of theories on the new movie."
Okay, wow. Be interested to hear them afterwards.
Yeah, well, tell me, for who doesn't know, who knows about as much as anybody about the new film, tell me a little bit about the character you play in there.
Well, the character I play is Bodhi Rook, and he's not the kind of son or grandson of anyone important in the Star Wars saga. He's just a long-distance truck driver, essentially. He's an Imperial cargo pilot. Mm-hmm. He's from an occupied planet called Jeddah, which is occupied by the Empire, and so to earn a living, he works for the Empire. Just carrying cargo long distance in his shuttle. And it's in the course of this job that he kind of comes across some information that makes him go through a kind of awakening, which is what Bodhi means. And he kind of decides to, he just makes some very fateful decisions and is forced to kind of reassess the choices that he has made and his allegiances and his actions. I guess it's ultimately about that moment when you realize you can't just live with your head in the sand. You know, you have to kind of engage with the problems in the world around you.
Is that why it's being called, and I've read 3 separate reviews that have referred to it as the most political Star Wars film. Is that the reason it's being called that?
I'm not sure if that's the reason. It's interesting that you could read reviews about it because I don't think anyone's seen the film yet, including myself.
So maybe I'm reading reviews of the trailers or reviews of the interviews.
Well, I think it's natural that people project their own concerns and preoccupations onto a kind of mythic tale like Star Wars. Yeah. It carries with it a kind of classic, infrastructure of like mythology. So it's kind of going to be timeless because of that. Yeah. And whatever is going on in the world around us, we're going to kind of almost project that onto it. So maybe at a time of great political turbulence, it's natural that people are interpreting it in that way.
Yeah, I think that's what we've always done. I think if you look at any kind of myths, even the myths that came around, during the stories of King Arthur, the kind of folk tales, I mean, people were projecting class issues onto that. People were projecting worries about their lives onto these stories. I think it's kind of common and kind of usual to project our own kind of fears onto myths.
Yeah, and probably healthy in a way. I mean, hopefully culture is a space for us to kind of work out some of our preoccupations in a way that kind of favors empathy, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly something that's exciting about this film is it's and any Star Wars film or a film of this scale is that so many different people, so many different backgrounds are invested in it. Mm-hmm. At a time when we can, things can feel very divided and divisive right now, political discourse or, unequal societies that we live in and stuff. But man, everyone loves a Star Wars movie. You know what I mean?
Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah, and that's something kind of beautiful about that. There are so few things that seem to kind of bring us all together these days. It's something I feel really privileged to be a part of.
When you were describing your character, again, our friend Steve here, who's operating the camera, who's shooting this and directing this in some ways, was nodding along as you were describing your character. As you mentioned, there's a different kind of fandom that you find with Star Wars fans than you find with really any other kind of fan subculture. Does that pressure feel different than it felt in previous roles you've done?
I mean, to be honest, this was my first studio movie. Everything I'd done up to this point was kind of indie movies and some TV series. Yeah. So it just feels cool to know that people will definitely see this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of the movies I've done, it's kind of like you're not sure if anyone will go and see it, whether it was Shifty or Four Lions or even Nightcrawler. Just not sure if it'll just disappear. So for me, coming from that background, it just feels really exciting and it's just a massive relief. It takes a lot of pressure off, actually, to know that people will go and see it. And in terms of pleasing everyone, I mean, I learned a long time ago with the kind of films that I've made that you can't ever please anyone, and neither should you.
Is that a hard lesson to learn?
Maybe when you're just starting out right at the beginning, but then I think I kind of learned quite early on, kind of dating back to those high school days, that maybe if you don't please everyone, something good can come of starting the conversations that disagreement might trigger, you know?
I want to return just for a moment. We only have you for a couple more minutes to talk a little bit about, you mentioned that a large group of people can watch Star Wars and enjoy it. And we talked a little bit about representation in the beginning of our conversation. When I was reading up on you, I noticed that you've said that the portrayal of ethnic minorities in movies and in television shows works in 3 stages. And I found that so compelling. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking about those 3 stages.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I'd kind of encourage people to read the essay in full to kind of get the context around this.
And I should say we'll post the full link on our website.
Well, no, I was just saying that I guess, like, to begin with, you sometimes get stereotypical portrayals. You know, the black dude will play the drug dealer, the brown dude will play the cab driver or the terrorist. And then you kind of get material or stories that takes place on similar terrain, but maybe kind of subverts or humanizes some of those stereotypes. So I did a film called Four Lions, which is about would-be suicide bombers, but they're kind of quite sympathetic characters because they're kind of farcical idiots that don't really understand what they're doing. And that kind of humanizes them. Or, I don't know, a show like The Wire, where you've got, you know, a large black cast playing drug dealers for the most part. But you kind of understand why they're doing it and you kind of sympathize with them. And then, so that's the second stage. And I guess the third stage is just, you know, just a guy.
I know you say Bob or Frank.
Yeah. Or Nas, you know,
Yeah.
or, you know, it doesn't have to be necessarily a kind of, you know, anglicized name or whatever. It's just, the point I was making is that they're characters that are not shackled to their kind of cultural specificity. And there's something liberating about that. Projects like Star Wars or like Born or The Night Of, I'd say, are kind of in that third area of representation where, you know, just playing a character, and yeah, sometimes it touches on their background, sometimes it really doesn't. But you're just a guy, not a cipher for kind of, you know, well-trodden social issues associated with that type.
You're a person, not a symbol.
Yeah, I guess.
When you were making The Night Of, the HBO show, speaking with Riz Ahmed, by the way, in addition to being part of the new Star Wars film, he's also part of one of the more critically acclaimed television series of this year, called The Night Of. Are those 3 stages something you talk about with the creators, with the people who, with your coworkers on The Night Of?
No, it's really not. I mean, I guess it's interesting because kind of, you know, stepping back to comment on the kind of bigger kind of cultural picture around representation and stuff like that is, you know, that might be the kind of thing you think about when you're in the shower on a long haul flight or, you know, whatever. But really, when I'm kind of taking on a role and tackling a role, I'm really not thinking about that kind of thing. Roles appeal to me on an instinctive level. Maybe part of that instinctive appeal or repulsion may be tied in with some of my concerns about representation, but it's not at the front of my mind. Really, I kind of just like to lose myself in researching the characters. That's what I really kind of get off on, and interviewing people and trying to build this character and then just investing in that. It's only kind of when you have some distance, you know, a couple of years after films come out and you get a sense of what the conversation has been around it, and, you know, you find yourself on a long haul flight somewhere or in the shower, these thoughts start forming. But yeah, I kind of guess any kind of cultural commentary, you know, that I might have to offer isn't really intertwined with my work as an actor. They feel quite separate to me in a way. One is about seeing the bigger picture. The other one is about losing yourself in the details, you know.
But and I think I want to leave on this, and I thank you so much for coming in, is the idea that a lot of actors who may feel the way that you do, who may have things to say, who may observe things about society that they either have a comment on, or things that they've noticed, or things that they'd like to change, or things that they'd like to see say the same. They're sometimes a little afraid to give that opinion out. They're a little afraid to let people know, to write op-eds, to tweet things, to put things up on their Facebook page for a myriad reasons. They may feel they are going to get some repercussions from their fans. They may feel like they might not get the right job if they say the wrong thing. These things don't ever seem to factor into your decisions. I'm wondering, like, where does that fortitude to openly speak about issues, even though you're in an industry that doesn't necessarily reward speaking out, where does that come from?
Stupidity. Mainly stupidity, impulsiveness, that kind of thing.
But you know what? Do you know what I mean? Like, some people feel like they can't say what they want to say.
I guess I feel like no one of us is gonna win at life. No one's gonna like play all the right cards and make all the right moves and like win. It's not a video game.
Yeah.
It's ultimately it's what we can all learn from each other and learn together. And I just kind of think like stories are the currency of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're kind of front line there on the trading floor, trading in stories, it would be remiss, I think, not to kind of share what insights you might have learned from being down there in the middle of the pit and to offer that up. And maybe someone else can run with that information and maybe that can inspire or challenge or annoy them in the right way, and then we all kind of move forwards together.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you said about honesty, because I think sometimes we can look at people, and I know I've been guilty of it. I don't know if you have, but you look at people and you say, you think, oh, they got it all figured out. That's the perfect life. There's nothing wrong there,
Yeah.
And then it's when people like that, people might feel that way about you. I mean, it's when they start speaking honestly about things that, being a little bit more vulnerable, talking about things that maybe aren't as easy to talk about. That's when we all start realizing that we're all kind of flawed.
Yeah, I think so. Kind of talking about your vulnerabilities and your uncertainties is maybe something that isn't rewarded in some ways, but I think one of the most rewarding kind of responses you can have to that kind of honesty is people saying, wow, I feel a little less alone. I feel like that too. I don't know, it's interesting kind of being in Toronto. I just drove past the CN Tower and I was thinking of that Drake album cover, and I was thinking like, Drake, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, like these are kind of three of the preeminent rappers of our time. And why they're so popular, I think it's because they talk about their vulnerabilities and they talk about their conflicts. Drake's always talking about how he's got so many cars, but he's upset because he doesn't know which one he should drive tonight. Whatever. It's like, and it's like, it's conflict makes for drama, and that's always compelling. So kind of sharing your contradictions, I think, is that's what makes us human.
Riz Ahmed, I want to thank you so much for coming in and spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it.